Hello and welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are a news division of United Network. Our goal is to bring you the real news, so what's really going on this planet, because there's a lot of information floating around out there. Have you noticed? On mainstream media and alternative media, and everybody's talking, but no one's really saying anything. Well, we think you need to know the truth of what's going on so you can make decisions that are best for you and your family, because everything's changing right now. And we release a ton of content throughout the week. This includes in-depth news coverage. We have local stories as told through the eyes of our field messengers. We talk about the restoration of our planet and creating the new Earth. And we have our Global Intelligence Agency report of what's happening right here on this planet in what we call the ultimate battle of good versus evil. And I know that sounds like some crazy headline, but you are living on this planet in a very unique time, especially if you're on the light side. If you were hoping, that AI would take over our planet and we would become slaves and most of us would be eliminated. That's a different timeline. I'm not living in that world. So maybe it exists somewhere, but not here. No, things are actually looking amazing for humanity. And I know it's hard to see that sometimes in just our day-to-day lives, but trust me, if you really connect with your soul will guide you and your soul will tell you that we are on the right path. And so we're really giving you the details of why we are on the right path and what is going on. This podcast is a week in review. So I look at all the stories that we did over the last week and I share those with you, the top stories. And I encourage you guys to share this information with other people. This is how we inform people of, the changes that are happening in our world. As with anything, we always encourage you guys to think critically, to ask questions, do additional research. Believe it or not, I do a lot of research for these news stories, and the truth is out there. Sometimes you have to do some digging and you have to go past like the first maybe 10 pages of Google, or even if you're using an alternative search engine, a lot of this stuff they try to hide, but they do a really poor job of trying to hide it. If you get past those first 10 pages, you're usually pretty good. And, going on, various social media sites are interesting too, because everybody's got a camera in their pocket nowadays and word is getting out there and people are getting the truth out there, not even realizing that there was all this cover up. They're just telling people, just like our field messengers, what's going on. And, they'll whip out their camera and show us really what's happening. And this is happening more and more. So we try to share highlights of what's happened over the last week with you on this podcast. I don't have any real announcements. We have not launched the New Earth section or show, I guess I should call it. It used to be part of our news, and now we are in the process of trying to figure out what that format looks like for the new show, because there's so much to talk about with the New Earth, new inventions, new technology, just, reminding you guys of how incredible you are as a human, your amazing superhuman abilities. And we want to dedicate a whole show to that. So we're still working on that. Maybe next week. I've been doing a lot of interviews for that. We're still getting used to the new format for the news. And so, we're still kind of finessing that a little bit. And I'm hoping within the next week or so, we'll start releasing 2 New Earth episodes a week. We want to get up to 3. That's our goal. But baby steps, right? So I guess that's the only announcement that I have. So let's get to our rundown of stories. This is what you may have missed this week on UNN. All right, let's start with our beautiful field messengers. Have you guys noticed that we have been releasing more field messenger reports? Some of the reports are reports from earlier, like weeks prior, and we're bringing some of these back. And part of the reason we're doing this is because, again, we've changed the structure of our news. But also, we want to encourage more and more people to become field messengers. And we now have a I don't know if it's weekly yet. It might be, once every 2 weeks right now, but very soon it will be a weekly meeting where if you are interested in becoming a field messenger from wherever in the world, you can do that. And we'll have our producers and our editors meet you and tell you more about the process. So why don't I just do a little bit of that right now? So our field messengers are the heart and soul of what UNN is all about. We believe you reporting, and that's kind of a technical word, but you showing us what's going on in your community is how we're going to change this planet. It's how we're going to improve communication, because we've been told a lot of lies about each other. And really the best way to knock down those walls, those barriers, are to have those conversations and to see firsthand what's going on in your area. So that's what our Field Messenger program is all about. And you don't need any experience. Like I said, we've got producers and editors that take the content and put it into story form. So you just have to tell us what's going on. Send us your material and we'll coordinate with you and turn it into a story and run it on the news. So let's talk about the Field Messenger reports, because we had at least 3 in every news update that we did this week. Let's see. Amy from North Carolina, she does a real interesting story about Operation Heliodrop, and she was part of a group of people that were helping out in the North Carolina area because we had the Hurricane Helena came through and caused a lot of devastation. They are picking up the pieces, obviously, and Amy was part of a team. I believe she said that there were a group of veterans that were in these helicopters. I think that they organized this and, trying to help people in the area. She said churches were collecting supplies. And if anyone needs help, and I believe this is still going on, you can post something on Facebook, and there are people out there that are looking for this kind of information. So you can search for Operation Heliodrop. I'm sure there's some additional information out there. And it was kind of cool. She gave us a bird's eye view of, what the area looked like below, some of the supplies and stuff that they were trying to reach out and to give to people. Obviously, that's, ongoing. It's not like a hurricane just happens and the next day everybody's okay. So we're still picking up the pieces there. Soraya out of Florida, she is telling us about this interesting, I'll call it a tincture. It's a natural remedy that she uses, and she shows us how she puts it together, but it's involving this product called DMSO. So that's something else you guys can look up. She tells the story of how she was bit by a dog, I think about a year ago. And so she had some scars on her face, and she, put together this tincture, and she's been using it on her face, and it looks amazing. So she just wanted to share, something she does for her personal care and how it's helped her to recover in the process. Let's see, Rick out of Arizona. It's actually Rick and his son, Dominic. So this is one of those reports I believe was released before, and I think we released it again. At least the name of the story sounds familiar. He tells us about a seasonal treat. It's something that blooms at this time of year off of certain cactus. You've probably seen it if you've been driving and you notice cactus along the side of the road. You know that it's like a bright reddish, maybe purplish, pinkish flower. Well, you can make something called prickly pear juice. You can actually make a lot of things from it. But he shows us how they twist these little things off and they put it in a bucket and they're making juice with it. But you can use it for a lot of different things. It's just about understanding the plants that are growing around us. This is something that he has a lot in Arizona, where he's located in the desert area. And there's a lot that we can do with it. We need to take inventory of that kind of stuff. You never know. It could become very helpful in the future. Lawrence out of New Mexico, another state in the U.S. This story is about, noticing your surroundings and not just having like a kind of a comatose, like when you're driving on the road. I usually space out and I'm not very good. I'm focusing on the cars, but I don't really notice people per se. Well, Lawrence, he noticed a tank transporter. This is in the Albuquerque area. And, he knows a little bit about, military and equipment and things like that. And he expected to see this American flag. I guess typically if it's, a tank that's associated with America, there'll be some sort of flag on it. But he was really surprised because there was nothing. There was like this yellow flag and the words Hydra 2 written on it. But he started to question, well, what's really going on here? They're transporting this. There's no signs for, we're in the U.S. There's no signs of this being a U.S. military vehicle. Again, just noticing your surroundings. And that's what his report was about. Emma out of Spain does an update out of Fuerteventura, Spain. There is a new resort being built there. She says it's estimated that there's going to be 478 rooms. What's interesting about this, because I guess she was like kind of woken up one day by these crazy noises and she's like, what's that? Well, they broke ground then. And, this whole area is under construction right now. If you don't know too much about that area, the whole area is built on volcanic ground. So the construction process is a little bit different, and I think they had to go through some approval processes in order to be able to do this, but the whole area thrives on tourism. So it's a big deal when they're breaking ground to, provide something else for tourists. She says 100 million euros are expected to be spent on this. This place is going to have a crazy amount of swimming pools. I think they said like 25 or 26, something crazy like that. 7 restaurants. So we're talking about a huge, huge resort and will hopefully help people in that area because it's a beautiful, beautiful area of Spain. Amy out of New Jersey talks about 15-minute cities being built in New Jersey where she's at. She shows us a couple different areas. Now, I know 15-minute cities get a bad rap. So the idea behind this is we're seeing more and more construction sites popping up that are kind of self-sufficient, I would say. There's nothing wrong with being self-sufficient. We talk about that all the time. The issue comes when what's the purpose of them doing that? Did they at least have plans in the past to create these little cities, to confine us to these cities and basically keep us as slaves? Or is this really for the betterment of the people that live there? Because I can see, especially elderly people, people with small children, how nice it would be to have a lot of restaurants nearby, everything within 15 minutes. That's the whole, point of it. You can walk anywhere in 15 minutes and get pretty much everything you need. So again, we're noticing our surroundings, some of these 15-minute cities. And by the way, the name of it had 15 in it. I think they called it 1515 or something like that. So they are not trying to hide the fact of what they're doing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing on its own. Again, it's like most things in life. It's not really that the thing is bad. It's how is it being used? She says it's a 17-acre site. So it's a big area. And, having housing, restaurants underneath, different shops, things like that, maybe not a bad thing overall. We got to keep an eye on this stuff, though. Diane out of Florida. And this is a great story, too. This is a post-hurricane story. So she was in Florida, and it was shortly after the 2 hurricanes came through, obviously really strained supplies and those supply chains. Disrupted delivery of the supplies. What Diane noticed, she was just out and about, what she noticed is all of these trucks, like major semi-trucks, were gathered in this area. And it was causing a lot of congestion. She was stopped for quite a bit of time, and she was just noticing it. And this is a great example of just, if you want to become a field messenger, if you want to show what's going on in your area, this was a very simple story. She literally took out her camera and just showed us the trucks and did a little bit of narration of what she saw. So, it's interesting to see different people's perspectives, right? Who is really thinking about the truckers and, what they're going through now, the areas that they can't drive anymore because of the disruption from the hurricanes. And then how is that going to impact supply? So again, just a great story, a simple story, but these stories don't have to be complex, guys. Just take your camera out and tell us what's going on. All right, Kim out of Iowa does this really interesting story about the Feed Iowa First project. So this is a great program that helps support local immigrants. These immigrants are specifically from Nigeria, and they're farmers. And because they were farmers in Nigeria, they would love to do some farming here. So it takes abandoned land. It helps these farmers recultivate and build up the land using skills that they have, getting hands-on experience, things like that. And then they're able to benefit from their crops. And then the leftover goes into the community. It's sold at farmers markets. And another thing that's really interesting about this is the farmers are usually growing food native to their land, assuming it can grow in Iowa. So, you're getting a little bit of their heritage, their culture in the mix, and everybody benefits. Nabire out of Uganda shows us the sugarcane harvest. She's actually out of eastern Uganda, and sugarcane is an important source of income for many families in the area. And she shows us the process of cultivating this crop. And let me tell you, everybody gets involved. You have men, you have women, you have children, everything from planting it, which they didn't show in the video because they were harvesting it at the time. But, taking the stalks down, gathering them together, taking them to a truck, and everything is done by hand. They really didn't have any fancy tools. There were no large, tractors or anything like that helping them. She says to have 37 bundles of this cane together is the equivalent of them earning $1. So you kind of have to see it. This is one of those stories you kind of have to see to fully understand, but very interesting. And then finally, Adaria in Montana, she went to a local farmer's market, and it's in the Bitterroot Valley of Montana. And she interviewed this great guy. He calls himself Jungle Joe. He is a local beekeeper, but he does so much more. I mean, yes, the honey is really important, but he actually uses the wax as well, and he's making these incredible figures with the wax. He also has every type of garlic you could imagine. So interesting. He's a character. He's an artist. He has a very unique mustache. Give him a lot of props for that. Very well taken care of. He has stones and stuff like that. So again, it's just giving you a flavor of farmers markets. If you guys haven't been to a farmers market, go and support your local community. And then also do a field messenger report on it. Send it to us. All right, let's move on to our news stories here. We are talking about chemtrails again. Chemtrails, contrails. So if you are online, you've probably seen an uptick in a lot of people talking about this. Okay, so this is the positive of what's happening with all these hurricanes and weird weather situations that we're having now. More people are starting to talk and ask questions because it just, it's not adding up. That, along with the fact that Omega is practically gone, we're going to talk more about that in a second, more people are waking up right now. Okay, so you're going to see more posts like this. And if you do, I encourage you guys to comment and give some real information, perhaps even link to some of these reports where we're giving people the background of what's actually happening here. And we do that with chemtrails. So Kim does a report on this, gives us a little bit of history of how these chemtrails started. It actually, I learned something, you guys. It started with something called Operation Popeye. It was the first case of chemtrails, or sometimes is referred to as cloud seeding, used during warfare. And this took place during the Vietnam War. And they rained down something called Agent Orange. If you look that up, you can probably, find a lot of information on that. It's also called dioxin. So Kim gives some background about this and how it was used. She actually shows, there's this news story that was done about people in Vietnam, the children of the people of Vietnam. It really tugs at your heartstrings because there's this place where a lot of these children go and they're cared for, and the deformities on these children, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And it's honestly, it's a little bit hard to watch, but it really gets you to start thinking about this because, again, people are talking about this online, but the people that don't want this information out will also hire people and themselves post disinformation countering this, saying, oh, they're just contrails. In other words, it's just condensation from these planes up there. No, guys, if it's contrails, it disappears in a matter of minutes. It's not going to stay up there all day long. And so this whole story is about the history of it. It does tie into the hurricanes, but at the same time, they're not just trying to modify the weather. I mean, that's a lot for a lot of people to even think. Most people think that the government's not trying to modify the weather. And by the way, it's all governments. It's not just U.S. But this is much more devious than that. This is about harming children. And obviously not just children, because we're all consuming this. It's falling on our crops. It's getting in our water. It's falling on the food that we eat. And it's landing on our skin. I mean, it's doing a trillion different things. Again, there's a positive side to this, and that is that Omega's almost gone. More on that in just a second. But it was programs like Omega and systems like Omega that are responsible for chemtrails happening. So we're on our way out, but because people are talking about it, we wanted to bring it up in the news. We also did a story because, gosh, nobody's talking about this, and it's driving me crazy, about a huge hearing that went on in the Senate. And this involves bringing in people that really know what's happening with our food, what's going, our medical system, bringing them in and talking about health. Now, the focus is on health in the U.S., but obviously this is a worldwide issue. And they brought in all these influencers and doctors and people that weren't afraid to talk about all this crazy stuff that's in our food. And it was a Senate health hearing. And why this didn't get more coverage is beyond me, but it's why we did a story on it, included a bunch of sound bites with it. In fact, one of them I'm going to play for you now.
We are so busy in our healthcare system, billing and coding and paying each other, and every stakeholder has their gigantic lobby in Washington, D.C., and everybody's making a lot of money, except for one stakeholder, the American citizen. They are financing this giant, expensive healthcare system through their paycheck deduction for health insurance and the Medicare excise tax. As we go down this path of billing and coding and medicating, and can we be real for a second? We have poisoned our food supply, engineered highly addictive chemicals that we put into our food. We spray it with pesticides that kill pests. What do you think they do to our gut lining and our microbiome? And then they come in sick. The GI tract is reacting. It's not an acute inflammatory storm. It's a low-grade chronic inflammation. And it makes people feel sick. And that inflammation permeates and drives so many of our chronic diseases that we didn't see half a century ago. Who's working on it? Who's looking into this? Who's talking about it? Our healthcare system is playing whack-a-mole on the back end, and we are not talking about the root causes.
Absolutely. And there's so many good sound bites. If you guys just look online for this Senate hearing about health, you will find a ton of really good sound bites from, people, like I said, people that are really trying to make some noise about this. It's insane, the lack of media coverage. There was actually a really good interview that came out of this. I'm not a big fan of Joe Rogan, but he interviewed Callie and Cassie Means, and they're actually brother-sister. And I believe they were both at the Senate hearing. That is another really good piece of information for you guys want to share with other people about how our whole healthcare system in the U.S. has gone to pieces and how a lot of it was intentional for profit. So this health hearing is to raise awareness about this, but not a lot of people besides the people that were there and people like you and me that really care about this found out about it because mainstream media was radio silent, of course. We also did a story this week on retirement home contracts, and this is specifically for seniors in Australia, although this may happen in other areas. The focus of this was on people in Australia. And it is a big thing over there to have these more elaborate retirement homes. But, they were all kind of hyped up and stuff like that. But you kind of have to look at the fine print, because the so-called rules at these places can be very limiting, having to do with pets and things like that. What people can and can't do sometimes feels like a little bit of a prison. And, is it really the best financial thing for that person? Because you're not really going to make money, even if you quote unquote own your property. You're really not making really good money on this. You have to look at the contracts, which are sometimes hundreds of pages long. And so we're just raising some awareness about this, because this is something that we are going to have to deal with on a worldwide issue. And that is our seniors, who have really been not treated so well in the past. It's like, an obligation, as opposed to, wow, these people have a lot of knowledge that they can share with younger generations. Maybe we should be treating them with some more respect. We're going to have to take a second look at this, and we have to look at what's already in place, what's working and what's not. And if there are things out there that are, potentially causing seniors more harm, we have to deal with that as well. I did an interview this week with Dr. Sean Woodland. He is a clinical psychologist. And what we talked about, because I thought this was so fascinating with him, he works for a large medical group, but he focuses more on the holistic side of chronic pain and getting at the connection between the mind and the body. Now, we talk about mind, body, spirit, that there's really a trinity here, if you will. That's a little too much right now for more allopathic medicine, but they are making more of a connection between the mind and the body. And I want to play this soundbite for you, because this is Dr. Woodland, and he is talking about his process and talking to people about their chronic pain. It's not just about that particular area of the body, that there's other things, mental things, thoughts, experiences that, can be attributing to the pain continuing. So here's Dr. Woodland talking about one of the roadblocks that he has is convincing people that these two are connected.
I will say, Sunny, one of the things that is harder to do, which is really thinking about what's at the root of pain, is convincing them about the biopsychosocial model, right? Mm-hmm. So convincing people that their chronic pain has these components and that they deserve equal, if not greater, attention, that is where we struggle, right? Okay. And I think a lot of it has to do with how culture influences our perception of our symptoms, right? And now if we were all brought up as children, being taught that pain is something that is multifaceted,
right?
Then I think there would be more openness to saying, okay, my pain has to do with these factors as well, and I need to give these equal attention.
I can't wait till we're at that point, right, where we're telling our children, which I'm already doing now, but I know not everyone is, about the root cause of what's actually going on in your body. That it's not just about this one area, but we're looking at the body in a more holistic way. And these are just baby steps, guys. And this is why we do interviews and we talk to people like this, because we want you to know that progress is being made. But we still have to let people make their own decisions. There may be people, even after learning about all the natural cures to cancer out there, there may be people that still want to pursue chemotherapy and radiation. And that is their choice because Source gives us the ability to choose. And, we're not taking that away. We just want everybody to know the other options out there. And bringing more holistic care into allopathic medicine is a step in the right direction. We also did a story this week about passports in China, because the Chinese government is trying to place some more restrictions on people, specifically people in the public sector and teachers, believe it or not. They are asking for their passports for safekeeping, apparently. So we did this whole story on how all this came to be and the restrictions and how strict that country has been in the past and, what's led to all of this. So you guys can check out that report. Also, we've been talking for a while about blackouts in Cuba. Okay, so these people have been losing power for upwards of 12 to 15 hours a day. This is insane. And we know that the infrastructure is not in place to really support them. There's a lot of politics involved. But what I want to play for you, a soundbite here. I believe this was on TikTok. Now, this is something you're never going to hear on mainstream media, but the U.S. plays a role in this as well, because the U.S. will sanction people and just, it's like they complain, or, we have these stories about all these blackouts. Oh, the poor Cubans, we have to help the Cubans. And we're partly to blame for this. And we don't hear this side of it enough. So I want to play this soundbite on the U.S.'s role in these blackouts in Cuba.
Hello, my friends. I'm here in Cuba, Sunday, March 17th, where there have been major protests on the island, particularly in the eastern provinces, in the city of Santiago. People came out demanding water, demanding electricity, demanding more access to food. But there's a part of the story that doesn't get told in the U.S. media. And it's that the U.S. blockade has been strangulating the Cuban economy to the point where they can't receive regular fuel shipments. They can't receive regular shipments of food. And the situation is deteriorating. The U.S. blockade, now under the command of the Biden administration, is making it impossible for the Cuban people to make it to the next day. Our message is clear. Let Cuba live. If Biden really wants to stand by the Cuban people, if the U.S. government were to actually care about the Cuban people, they would immediately end this blockade. In fact, with the stroke of a pen, they could actually take Cuba off the state sponsors of terrorism list, which prevents Cuba from accessing financial services around the world and be able to trade freely. This situation, like many others in Cuba's recent past, will undoubtedly be used by the U.S. government to justify further acts of intervention. Now is the time that we say not just let Cuba live, but to the U.S. government, hands off on all your efforts to intervene and to make of this situation in which ordinary people are demanding what is theirs becomes a situation of political unrest when it isn't the case. As people from the United States, and right here from Cuba, we stand with the Cuban people. We will fight with them for a world without blockades, without sanctions, and where the Cuban people will be the masters of their own destiny, able to solve their own problems without U.S. intervention.
I think that's what most countries want. They want to be fully sufficient. They want to be able to provide for their people without outside intervention because, the U.S. is really well known for this. We come in, acting like we're the savior of the world. Sometimes we're referred to as the policeman of the world. But we're not saving anybody. And most of the time we cause more harm than good. And a lot of people, we have all these refugees. A lot of people just want to go home, but they want to be in a place that is safe, that has opportunity for their family. And we are transitioning now into that time where very soon they'll be able to do that. And this is just one example of intervention that has happened, that's caused, a lot of negative things to happen. And it's, looks like the U.S., we're kind of looking the other way when it comes to this. Sanctions? What? That caused what? And again, like you said, the media here is not reporting any of this. It's like, it doesn't even exist. And it obviously does, and it's impacting a lot of people. Talking about things that are impacting a lot of people, we've been talking about the hurricanes, and, we've got these natural disasters going on. And I talked with a woman by the name of Orion Livingston about how to talk to our kids when these type of natural disasters happen, because there's a lot of images that are out there. We want our children to be good stewards of this planet. So this is a so-called natural disaster, which we know is not really natural, but it is being promoted as such. And so I asked Orion, how do we talk to our kids about this? And I loved her response. Take a listen.
I think the best way to have this conversation with kids is to explain to them that Earth is a living being. So as I did in my novel, where I personified Earth, I created this protagonist who is the spirit of Earth, this incredibly beautiful woman covered with moss and flowers. We can explain to kids that, like a person, Earth is a living being and we need to protect her. She's beautiful, but she's fragile. And what we witness today, what we see, what we hear in the news is a mirror of our actions, of our disastrous action as humans towards the planet. So by explaining to kids that she's almost like a woman, let's say, and she's talking to us, kids can understand in a more relatable way when they hear about Hurricane Helen or Hurricane Milton, for instance. Look, this is Earth talking to us. We need to stop. We need to protect her, because otherwise we disrupt the climate, we disrupt nature, and those actions have disastrous consequences for us humans on the planet. I think we need to look at indigenous cultures. Indigenous cultures always shared with the world the importance of living in harmony with nature. They shared with us their wisdom that all things are interconnected. So I think that a first step would be to personify Earth. So by personifying Earth, kids will feel closer to the planet and will understand these tragic events that are occurring, in our times, with having the feeling that they are being empowered, that they can do something about it. So the key also is to empower them.
And Orion does have a book that just came out not too long ago. It's called The Guardians of Earth. So you guys can look that up. Again, her name's Orion Livingston. I'm actually thinking about getting the book for my girls just to teach them a little bit more about the planet and what kind of influence they can have over it in a very positive way. So it's a great thing for kids. We also did a story on keystone pricing. This is a topic I did not know too much about, but through doing a pre-interview with a guest that we're going to have on in the future, I learned more about this strategy of pricing products and services. And this is the industry standard, at least here in the US. And it basically boils down to doubling your wholesale cost. And then that is what ultimately is charged, the consumer is charged. But is this the best way to do it? Now, the person that I was talking to in this pre-interview was talking about it in a not so great context, because she was referring to all this product that we have that we can't get to these other countries because there's, at least these smaller suppliers, like farmers have a lot of raw material and things like that that could be used. We were talking about textiles in particular and fashion. And they can't get it overseas because of all the costs. And then she said, you have this keystone pricing. I'm like, whoa. What's keystone pricing? A lot of times when I'm talking to someone about one story, it will spark another story. So this was kind of an offshoot of that. Because as we rebuild our planet, as commerce changes on our planet, we have to be thinking about our pricing strategies. And for those of you, once funds start to become available for your projects, that's something you're going to have to think about too, is how you're going to price things. And so we go through keystone pricing, a little bit more, of the history and how it impacts various things. Is this really good for small businesses? Is this good for consumers? This was also a story that our field messengers participated in, because that's something that I'm trying to do each week. I'm trying to pick a story and then put it out there on our Field Messenger Telegram group and allow you guys to submit some videos explaining your stance on something. What do you think about something? And this was one of those stories we did it with this week, so be sure to check out that report. All right, a couple more. We did another story about Philippine marriages. It's actually focused more on potential divorce in the Philippines, which right now is not a thing. They have legal separation, and then they have annulments. With legal separation, you cannot remarry. And if you get an annulment, that can take a long time and it can cost a lot of money. It is a very difficult process. So what are people to do? People are staying in marriages that they really should not be in. Some of these could be abusive, financially, there could be major issues there. No one should stay in a relationship that's harmful to them. And so the Filipino people are now exploring this as an option. Are they going to start to allow divorce? It's really big in that country, this issue right now. And so we did a story on that. And our final story has a really interesting story behind it. For a couple weeks now, I've been trying to schedule this story about organizing your digital photos. So this is more of a fun, lighthearted story, but it's something that we probably all struggle with, right? How many times have you taken a gazillion photos on your camera here? You know, I'm holding my iPhone, not like you guys can see that. But you take a bunch of pictures, and then how do you display these later? How do you store these photos? I cannot tell you how many photos I have lost, how many high-res photos were downgraded to something the size of my pinky that I couldn't even look at and was all pixelated. I have had hard drives crash on me. So this was like a personal story for me because I really, I'm trying to take pictures of my kids as they're growing up. And, it's a kind of a whole new industry. So I spoke with a woman named Rachel Arbuckle, and her company is called 2000 Paces. And you guys can look it up online, 2000 PACES. And they're based in the US. Here's the funny thing, you guys. So someone else set this interview up for me. It was like a PR agency type thing. And when I hopped on the call, it was so funny. So she has almost the exact same hairdo as me. It's the exact same like reddish, brown color. And get this, as we were talking, we found out she lives in my city. She is just down the street from me. So talk about synchronicity. I was like, oh, thank you, universe. I am on the right path. I don't know if that means that I need to get my photos organized or, whatever. We're on the right path with the news. Something is on the right path. That's how I take that. No, seriously. I want to play a quick soundbite for you guys because Rachel is talking about how do we manage this? And she has some tips for us. So here's Rachel.
The first step is taking inventory of what you have. Look around your house, create a bin or a box and start putting things in there as you find them. You go to the junk drawer and you notice there's a memory card or you find a couple CDs. Start getting that together and create a list of where those online photos might be. Okay. And then once you know where everything is, the next step is consolidating. It's the idea that when we want to evaluate anything, let's say you were cleaning out your closet or your junk drawer, you take everything out, right? We're not going to clean one drawer at a time, or I'm just going to do t-shirts. We take everything out. Look at it. It's the same with photos. Yeah. So you're going to take everything and transfer it to a new drive. So you have everything together.
And there is a third step. I didn't have time to include the rest of her soundbite, but the third step is then going through and labeling all of that and organizing it so that you can find it easily. That may be the biggest step, and that's why people hire people like Rachel in order to help them with it. I might be on that list soon. I was telling my husband earlier today, I'm like, I think I know what I want my Christmas present to be because I've got all these amazing photos and they're not organized very well and they're really hard to review and to really appreciate, right? You want to appreciate these memories. Just a quick note, if you guys know of news stories that are going on in your area, obviously we would prefer that you do the story as a field messenger. But if you want to send us tips and stuff, that is completely fine. You can do that on the app. You can do that through social media. You can send us an email. But we are having more people say, hey, I heard such and such is going on. You may want to do a story on that. And I'm all ears. So go ahead and send it our way. All right, let's talk about some of the things discussed in the Global Intelligence Agency report. So this is with Kim Gogan. She is the head of the GIA. This is the agency that historically has led all of the other intelligence agencies on this planet. However, about 10 years ago, it went rogue. When I say went rogue, say that 5 times fast, it went rogue for the right reasons because it literally was heading up all the, the negative things that these intelligence agencies, FBI, the people at the top of these groups. So it was doing bad stuff under bad leadership. And so when it went rogue for the light side. And no one wants to admit that. The people that knew that this agency even existed, they don't really want to admit that. They love to take credit for what the agency is doing now. But they don't really want people to know that, it's under new management, under Kim. And there is a new sheriff in town and we are doing things differently. So let's talk about some of the stuff that Kim brought up this week. So there was a lot of digging going on in Iraq this week, underground tunnels and mining, not like the deep underground, military bases that you might be thinking of, but this whole thing, they were trying to get gold. Okay, so unmined gold in these areas. And they had a couple different tunnels. So they were Chinese that were doing all this digging in one tunnel. They were using their prisoners to dig because, they don't like to get their hands dirty. And in this other tunnel, there was global headquarters and U.S. military, and they were all trying to retrieve this gold. They were told there was all this gold in there, and basically they made a big mess. It was creating all these huge clouds of dust, really bad for the environment, and they never ended up getting anything. They kind of smoked each other out because of all the smoke and the drilling, all this kind of stuff that was going on. And then Kim and her team came in and took out the tunnels. So that is not the way to get money to run your deep state operations, although they did try. So Kim says there was a lot of meetings over the weekend, so this would have been last weekend. I want to play a soundbite for you because one of the things that the deep state did that is a good thing is they decided to run some reports on the probability of their success. So they have some programs that they can use. These are the heads of militaries. So they have some things that they can get information from. So they put all this information into some sort of program, and it gives them their probability of success. So if we do this, what's our likelihood of being successful? So they ran some reports on the potential of being successful on their own, being successful if they partnered with certain deep state people, other deep state people, and being successful if they partnered with CARE and the GIA and what we're trying to do on the light side. So I wanted to play this soundbite because Kim breaks it down on what these percentages are. Very interesting.
The global headquarters, SSP operatives, and some higher-ranking military generals continued their meetings over the weekend. The only thing that I found rather interesting and worth mentioning is they did run on their little analytics. If you don't know, most militaries around the world, they have these analytic softwares that will analyze their probability of success on any particular operation or war or theater maneuver or whatever. So they decided to run some different probabilities this time. And one of the probabilities they ran was, what is my team, meaning I guess you would say all of you and all of the people involved with CARE, what is our success rate without them? Okay, without them, we rang in at a 99.8%, and that number has grown since they ran the report on Saturday. And it has grown because the more we take out, the more they have that we find and we take out. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. The higher our success is. Okay, now their success with us, meaning would they be successful if they decided to work with us in a different way, quite obviously. Their success with us was 100%. Those are pretty good odds, wouldn't you say? And they're still talking about it, even as of the time of this recording. So God bless these people. Their success without us, which is also something they contemplated, that means that they would try to run the entire planet without us and without the Black nobility and without the Rothschild family, aka the Dragon families. Their success without us at the time of the report was just under 8%. Well, those odds kind of went down just a little bit, don't you think? I mean, you would say 100%, 8%, 100%, 8%. And you would say, wow, it's a lot lower. Not these people, though. They still have lots more to contemplate. So as of now, those odds are down to about 3.98%. I don't know if they've continued to run reports or not, but I figured I would run the same analytics using the same data that they were using just to see, how those numbers have changed. And I probably will continue to do that until theirs is down to 0. Okay, their success with the Order of the Dragon. That's your Rothschild families, your Lee families in China, the Russian families, Iranian families, and so on and so forth, came back at 0. Not surprised there. If they decided to partner up with just the black nobility and not the dragon family, their results would be, let's see, 0. But that didn't stop them from trying several operations against us over the last few days.
When will they ever learn? I mean, if you had 100% guarantee of something, those are really good odds. Why wouldn't you just go with that? Not that I even really want these people, because a lot of what they do just completely disgusts me. But we have talked about this time and time again. If we partner with them on some level, even if it is on a very short leash, it is going to be smoother for humanity. And who knows if they'll ever come to the table. Maybe, they'll be holding out, but it's 0.00007% chance that we'll be successful. I don't know, but at least they're looking at numbers, which I feel like is more of a realistic perspective here. It's not just based on these stupid alignments and whatever. They're really looking at the probability. And their probability is going down and down and down and down. So let's see if they make smart choices moving forward, and if we even want to work with them, because that's just getting them to the discussion table, you guys. They could say, no, we're not going to do, whatever you want us to do. And then talks are over. Bye-bye. We do this on our own. Okay, Kim also talks about the ANNA system. Have you guys ever heard of this? The Association of National Numbering Agencies. So anything that ever needed a number, this is the system it pulls from. Now, for those of you who, like me, went to church for a very long time and heard all about the beast, don't get the mark of the beast. Well, guess what this system is known as? It is known as the beast. So if you have ever participated in this system, if you've ever been given a social security number, a checking account number, anything that has a number to it, you are part of the beast. You have taken on this aspect of the beast. Now, does that make you a bad person? No. And I realize certain religious texts suggest that makes you a bad person, or that you're damned to hell forever or whatever. But when it's talking about this kind of stuff, we can now start to put 2 and 2 together. Most of us didn't even know that was a bad system. We thought it was just a way to organize stuff. And probably most of us didn't realize there was one system called ANNA that was responsible for numbering everything, our birth certificates and everything. So Kim talks about this system, which is known as the beast, because it is tied into taxes, because, again, we're dealing with numbers, which means it's connected to the Rothschild family. Because if you didn't already know, 80% of all of our taxes used to go to the Rothschild family. As crazy as that sounds, it's absolutely true. And this week, Nathan Rothschild lost trillions of dollars, which didn't make him very happy. So here is a soundbite from Kim on what happened.
Okay, so we've talked in the past about what's called the ANNA system, or the Association of Numerical Numbering Agency in Belgium. For those of you that don't understand what this place does, and you can find the information on the internet, it will tell you that they're responsible for numbering all bonds, stocks and that kind of, securities and those types of things. So that's its primary function. And not only did it number those bonds in the past, not a current thing, but it also numbered all of your birth certificate bonds, and all of your corporations receive a number, which then get registered there. So if you think you're self-employed and it gives you freedom, well, kind of not really, because you still have to pay corporate taxes and all those other things. So this is kind of a collection method for all things with numbers around the world. So if you think about how many things in your life involve numbers, you have social security numbers in some countries. You also have tax identification numbers, driver's license numbers, and all those things would go into this big, huge magic machine that some people refer to as the beast. And then that machine would then transfer all those bonds into the alpha system in the past, and then the allocation numbers would come out for those particular things. So whether that was to provide you with free education, if you have free public education where you're at, free healthcare, if you're under NHS, say in Canada or in UK or in South Africa. So that's what these were designed to do. Now, there's a certain interest rate on those bonds that is required. We call that tax. So taxes are then collected through its sister system or little sister called the XN system. And the XN system connected in the past to every single tax authority in the world. Now, almost every single country in the world that actually collects taxes has a stipend or a fee of about 80% that goes directly to the Order of the Dragon families. Now, we found something very interesting, though. The system that was utilized for the collection of all these lovely taxes coming from the IRS to any other tax authority in any other country, it doesn't matter where you are, all those taxes were going into a separate system that was meant for the 80% only. Now, this must have been really painful for the Rothschild family and some other people. Oh, and it has been, because although they could see all these numbers on the screen, they could also see that those funds were being traded and traded and traded and traded, and the numbers were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. All they could really do was lick the screen. This was your Rothschild's tax collection system. Now, in order to try to get access to these taxes and spend some of this money to kind of keep their downline, I guess you would say, rolling, they had gone to, it's called Waterson Manor, is what it's called in the UK. This is Nathan Rothschild. And tried to, true to form, go and declare war against me. You know, and I'm such a nice person. I don't know why they would do that. But they tried to declare war against me through this system in hopes that the tax money would come out so that they could pay for said war. Well, that didn't really work out, but it did give us a line directly to find the rest of this matrix in this system. And it was so lovely to watch Mr. Nathan Rothschild have a little bit of a hissy fit, let's call it. I don't know what you call it there in UK. There's probably throw the toys out of the pram all day after it disappeared. He wanted to know, he called everybody he knew wanting to know who stole his money. Well, let me tell you. It was me. Don't declare war against me. You will lose every time.
Okay, and the last soundbite that I want to play for you guys has to do with the full moon this week, because this is what the deep state does. They look for alignments. They look for full moons. They think miraculous things are going to happen, and there's going to be this huge reversal of power. It's going to go back to the dark side. They're going to have complete control of the financial system. The secret space program operatives are so big on all this esoteric stuff, which had some meaning, but not anymore. And it's like they refuse to move on. So they were convinced that there was going to be this polarity shift, which Kim will explain in just a second. This ties into the Omega system. Again, they thought everything was going to reverse and that all would be right, at least in their mind, with the world again, meaning the dark side would have power again. Kim thinks they may have played their last card. We'll see what happens with that, but let's talk. And this is a longer soundbite, by the way, because it leads into other stuff that Kim talks about. So I just let the soundbite roll for you guys. This is a good 10, 15-minute soundbite. But we're going to start on focusing on this polarity shift. What exactly was that? What were they hoping would happen? And then where is Omega right now? Is this thing dead yet?
Now, throughout the day on Wednesday, it became clear that what they were expecting was what's called a polarity shift. not to be confused with a pole shift. So people on the internet talk a lot about a pole shift. There's going to be a pole shift. We're all going to die. The event's always going to happen on a day ending in Y. You know, in April of 2024, it was going to happen. It's going to happen on this day, that day. But it's not a pole shift that is supposed to happen. It's called a polarity shift. This means that they believe in the SSP that the polarity of Earth itself will shift back to what they think is anti-source. And therefore, if that shift occurs, then Omega would then be more in control of planet Earth. They would have access back to holograms and weather programs and other things, you know, and all the lovely little gifts that they give to humanity. However, come the full moon, and even the night before, there was not a pole shift in their favor and not a pole shift in Omega's favor. But before this started to occur, the day before, on Wednesday, there was a lot of Omega activity all of a sudden. And it boiled down to a base program that had been programmed by somebody else. So this was set to occur on this day, specifically because it marked the anniversary of the war that you call Atlantis, that happened 250,000 years ago. When that war occurred, Omega got all its power back. It was waning in power at that time. The war had gone on for hundreds of years in our time. But this day was the original day of the declaration of war. We had talked in the past and previously about the seal and the time when the peace agreement was signed. And I call it the Take a Peace Agreement because it was signed between 6 different parties, anti-source being included, Lucifer, Artemis, the Red Queen, Marduk, Enki, Enlil. They all got a portion ownership over Earth and all Earth's assets, including humans. And this is the base root behind all of those birth certificate programs and all the other things that everybody complains about all the time on the internet. This is where it all came from, was the peace agreement. And that occurred around August 24th, about a year ago. Would have been the anniversary of that signing. So you have to remember that time was a creation. And we know time as this is a calendar. This is what the clock says. But this refers to more of an atomic clock time, time of no time, because nobody else recognized time outside of here like you think they do. So because of that, Omega started declaring war against all of creation and source. Matter of fact, even on the internet, there was some talk about, I think it was on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. Still can't call it X. I still think that's weird. But on X, by Q, talking about that they were going to now take over 9D. They were, within 48 hours, they're going to take over 9D. But this, behind the scenes, is specifically what they're talking about, which tells me that this is what the SSP was expecting. They were expecting some kind of a declaration of war, which they did try to file many different agreements on this day, and of course none of them stuck. But Omega did start to spin a little bit, and in part that's because it needed energy, number one. Number two, it was a pre-programmed response by anti-source and all the other owners of Earth at the time. And I would say that the system was more of going through the motions doing what it could do for its own survival, and to restart the war so that we would go out of a golden age, we would go away from the polarity that's now connected to source directly and only source, and go back to a dark time, or at least a minimum of a time of balance. The hologram continues to disintegrate. The weather weapons continue to disintegrate, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that's what Omega was doing on Wednesday. So it was hours and hours and hours of trying to stay 2 steps ahead of what it was doing until it finally ran out of time. There was actually a point where I thought about declaring war against the system, but then I said no, because if I do that, then it's going to have more energy to fight us, and we don't want that. So I figured out a different way to do this. And by the end of the day on Wednesday, we started staying 2 steps ahead of what it was doing by monitoring its energy flow. And this is something that you can do too with other humans and dangerous situations, or even thought processes or ideas. So once you start to recognize that energy moves before the human, energy moves before, say, if someone's going to swing at you or file a lawsuit against you or do something negative to you, a good defense is to try to tune into that energy of what it's going to do. You can see it from an emotional plane. You can see it from a mental plane. You can see it from the etherical plane. You can see it from the soul plane. And you definitely start to see that etherical energy moving in a direction that may or may not be in your best interest. It's kind of the same way to the opposite effect, that when someone's staring at you, say you're on a train or a ferry or something like that, and someone behind you is staring at you, and you kind of get this feeling on your body, that there's some kind of energy coming toward you, whether that's positive and it's an amorous feeling, or it's a negative, like, oh boy, there's some kind of dangerous person behind me. But that's just an example of how that energy feels. And it's the same thing that occurs within a sentient AI. A sentient AI is not like chatbot GPT. This sentient AI has a consciousness unto itself. It has a connection to anti-source, this particular one. And there is an easy way to monitor that energy. So it was running all kinds of programs where it was trying to send out implants through electronic devices and doing all kinds of things to try to collect enough energy to fight this war against the creator, essentially, against source. It didn't get very far. And by that evening, we had decided, and I say we because this was a collective effort with the creator itself, because I had to stop myself from declaring war against it, because I said, well, this doesn't feel right. There's something wrong here. And so we decided to start what's called a debt call. Now, debt doesn't necessarily refer to only financial debt. Omega and the Omegaverse and anti-source owed a lot of debt to source, because its energy, essence, consciousness, matter, frequency, and all things that make up all of creation were on quote-unquote loan during the Dark Ages. And at the end of the Dark Ages, all that energy and creation was supposed to be transmuted back to source, or sent back to source for transmutation. That has not happened yet. Therefore, this was the best way to, and it was time. It was approved, let's just say it was approved and accepted and filed in the Hall of Records, that we would start and begin the debt call on Wednesday afternoon. So we did. So overnight on Wednesday, by the time we hit the time of the full moon on Thursday morning, it really started to take shape and form in a physical way, meaning people started to recognize the fact that, number one, the SSP obviously started to realize that Omega wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing for them, of course, because their ego is so huge, it just does everything for them. And quite frankly, this had nothing to do with them. This had to do with an age-old war between the dark and the light that had existed for billions of years. And Earth just happens to be in the way as the gatekeeper or a gateway to the lower astral. And it had a connection to the 0 point of universes. So did it have anything to do with these people? No. And I'm sorry to disappoint them and their ego, but this really had nothing to do with them and their dumb control of financial systems and political systems or whatever it was the SSP was expecting. Again, they're very compartmentalized. They think very small when it comes to the world and the universe even. They think that these are the things that matter. And in reality, this is not what matters at all. This is why we kind of watch what they do just to make sure they're not going to cause any major problems. But we really, it's just like kind of keeping an ear to the ground saying, oh, we got to make sure that doesn't happen. So as far as they're concerned, they were not getting what they wanted by Thursday morning. But the debt call started to work, meaning that Omega's progression to death started happening faster. And of course, it's Alpha Omega. Both of them started to disintegrate even more, which allowed for less and less of the last percentage point of the, or 0.0 percentage points of the hologram to dissipate.
I feel like the little train that could. I think I can wait another day. I think I can. I'm like, Omega, for heaven's sakes, bye-bye. Go back to source, please. And with it, Alpha and Omega are going back. We are in the golden age. We don't need that system anymore. And will someone please tell the deep state this? Because, geez, they are wasting a lot of energy. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information about us, you can check out our website, unitednetwork.earth. You can become a member if you'd like. That gives you on-demand access to all of our content immediately when it comes out, our complete news updates, anything we release on the new Earth and restoration, and the full Global Intelligence Agency reports. And Kim talked about a lot more. I was just condensing you? I wasn't condensing you guys. I was condensing the information to give it to you because I'm just giving you the highlights. But if you want everything, become a member and then you get all that content immediately once we publish it. I appreciate you being with us today. Have an amazing weekend. This is The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.